the engineer just got a massive buff, greatly improving its DPS, value, and more. In this video, I'll be showcasing the stat changes, uses, and capabilities of this tower, then give my personal ranking of how good it is, and whether or not it's finally better than the Accelerator. So, hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get started. At level 0, its placement cost stayed at 750 cash, but its fire rate was decreased from 1508 to 1258, improving its DPS from 2.65 to 3.18. Its sentry at this level didn't change, and still deals 2.18 DPS. At level 1, its fire rate decreased from 1.508 to 1.258, its dead zone increased to 3, and its DPS went from 3.98 to 4.77. Again, its sentry was unchanged. At level 2, its total cost increased from 1300 to 1400, its fire rate decreased from 1.58 to 1.258, its max units increased from 1 to 2, and its DPS went from 3.98 to 4.77. Now it can place 2 sentries, which means their combined DPS went from 2.18 to 4.36. At level 3, its total cost increased from 3050 to 3400 cash, its fire rate decreased from 1.258 to 1.108, its max units increased from 1 to 2, and its DPS went from 9.54 to 10.83. Its rifle sentries didn't change, but it can now spawn 2 of them, meaning their combined DPS went from 7.75 to 15.5. At level 4, its total cost increased from 6550 to 7150 cash, its fire rate decreased from 1.008 to 0.858, its max units increased from 2 to 3, and its DPS went from 17.86 to 20.98. Since it can now place 3 sentries instead of 2, their combined DPS went from 15.5 to 23.25. At level 5, its total cost increased from 20,300 to 20,900 cash, its fire rate decreased from 1.008 to 0.858, and its DPS went from 34.72 to 40.79. Its machine gun sentries were not changed. Finally, at level 6, its total cost increased from 52,800 to 53,400 cash, its damage increased from 50 to 60, its fire rate decreased from 0.808 to 0.658, and its DPS went from 61.88 to 91.19. The War Machine sentries were buffed, dealing 90.67 DPS instead of 79, improving their combined DPS from 316 to 36.68. So, overall, while it did get slightly more expensive, its DPS and value have greatly improved. If you combine the sentry's DPS with the engineer itself, at max level it is a total of 453.87 DPS, which is 75.99 more than before. That is an insane amount, and by far the highest DPS in the game, being 169.06 more than a max accelerator. Considering its total cost of 53,400 cash, that gives it a DPS cost ratio of 8.5, which is incredible. In comparison, the accelerator only has a value of 5.19 at max level, which is significantly worse. Also, the engineer has so many levels and only costs 750 cash to place, so it can effectively be used the entire game as you gradually upgrade it. While you do need to wait one wave before you can afford it, once you can place the engineer, it can defend by itself without any leaks until wave 7 in fallen mode, which is really good. That's as long as 3 golden scouts, which is often regarded as one of the best early game towers. Then, level 3 is a great option against the mid game, with its rifle sentries being able to take down pretty strong bosses. And at max level, the War Machines absolutely destroy late game crowds, having both high single target DPS and splash damage with its rockets. So it's going to be able to kill pretty much anything in front of it. That means it can rack up some huge damage, and now stands as a serious competition to the Accelerator, which has worse value and no crowd control. The engineer has a placement limit of 6, meaning the max DPS you can get using them is 2,723.22. The Accelerator has a better placement limit of 8, but still has a lower max DPS of 2,278.48. On top of all this, the sentries are basically stun immune after level 4, having shields that can completely block any attack and recover after a couple seconds. This can give the engineer a more reliable DPS in the late game, and you won't have to worry about it suddenly not attacking. This can get overwhelmed though if enemies attack very rapidly. That'd be a problem and cause the engineer to lose a lot of DPS, as it will take a while for it to slowly reconstruct all of its sentries. It also gets hidden, lead, and flying detection, but this only applies to the engineer itself, so it's not that helpful. Unfortunately, there are some glaring downsides to this tower. First of all, because it has to deal a certain amount of damage before placing sentries, that makes it pretty unreliable if it isn't attacking constantly. If left alone for long enough, then suddenly ambushed by a strong enemy, something might slip past your defenses before the engineer can build all of its sentries. But for the most part, this can be counteracted by just making sure your engineers are placed at the front of the map. There is, however, one massive flaw, and that's the fact that the sentries cannot be buffed by anything, only the engineer can. This excludes the 50% fire rate buff from the commander and a 20% damage buff from the mercenary base. Since only the tower itself is affected, even with all these boosts, 6 engineers only gain an extra 437.71 DPS for a total of 3,160.93. And while the accelerator isn't fully buffed either, because of its overheat mechanic, it benefits a bit more, with 8 max buff accelerators having DPS of 3,272.72 or an extra 549.5. Surprisingly, this isn't that much better, being only 111.79 more than what 6 6 engineers can get. And remember, the engineer has significantly better value, being 63% more cost efficient at max level. That's a huge difference, meaning not only can you get it a lot earlier, but you won't have to farm as intensively. Also, it doesn't just occasionally stop attacking for 4 seconds like the Accelerator, so its attack is a lot more consistent, given that you don't give it time to lose all of its sentries. While the Accelerator does have the advantage of good hit detection, you can usually cover that requirement with some other tower. I'm gonna say, because of the significantly better value, the fact that 8 Accelerators can only get slightly more DPS, even when considering support towers, the fact that the Engineer is amazing all throughout the game, while the Accelerator can only be placed in the mid to late game, and the Engineer has better coverage because of its rockets, overall, I'm gonna say it's better than the Accelerator. But of course, the Accelerator does have its advantages that we mentioned, with the main one being that it can't suddenly lose all of its DPS from multiple stomps and then have to slowly build it back, so there will be cases where it's still better. At the end of the day, it really just depends on what you're looking for, as both of these towers have their ups and downs. Regardless, the Engineer gets a high S tier ranking from me. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about this rebalance and whether or not it's now better than the Accelerator. And if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to join the Blue Head Mafia. Also, if you want to talk to me, consider checking out my Discord. We got some pretty cool features, like a custom party finder bot that will automatically pair you up with other people who are trying to do the same strategy. There's a link to the server pinned in the comments. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out to these channel members for supporting my content. If you want to add me as a friend on Roblox or get early access to some of my videos, consider becoming a channel member. It helps me out a lot and I really appreciate it. Anyways, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.